Starseed, the third millennium, living in the post-historic world by Ken Carey. Part 2, Chapter 7, the spontaneous precision of instinct. As every good athlete and martial artist knows, there is an intuitive, natural way of being that is essential to swift and effective response to the rapid shift of energies and opportunities inherent in each moment. One cannot play a good game of tennis while making rational decisions on how to proceed. A shortstop does not make a leaping catch, twirl 180 degrees while still in the air, and fire the ball to second base for the double play by pursuing an analytical process and mentally deciding how to proceed. The home run hitter does not connect with a 95-mile-per-hour pitch by consciously analyzing the trajectory and velocity of the ball and calculating where to place the bat. A process of reasoning does in fact occur in each of these instances, but it is a superior form of reasoning that occurs below the level of the athlete's conscious awareness, with speed and accuracy surpassing that of even the most advanced computers. Athletes who reach excellence in their chosen sports have learned to trust a type of rational analysis that occurs almost instantaneously below the level of typical historical thought. In the coming age, it will not be just athletes and martial artists who experience this, but everyone in every field. Such intuitive response to the moment will become taken for granted in the coming millennium. It will be a matter of course. This divine dance of inner direction is humankind's natural way of being. There are times when it is appropriate for decision-making to be slowed to a mental level. But what was intended to be chosen consciously as an occasional option has become the historical norm. This is the typical way ego-bound people live their lives. In fact, human beings were never driven from any primordial paradise of the Garden of Eden. Their decision to place exclusive emphasis on the cumbersome, rational thought processes of their egos, and to ignore and eventually forget they even had their natural, intuitive ways of processing information, altered humans' perceptual apparatus to such an extent that they could no longer see the beauty and wonder of the earth around them. The information that enters your awareness is subject to interpretation by two separate, yet potentially and prehistorically compatible systems. The system designed to be your primary system functions automatically below the level of conscious awareness. In that system, information is organized and interpreted by your spirit, or soul, or higher self. In the system designed initially to be your backup or supplemental system, information is organized and interpreted by a subjective association. This system, of course, is the one with which you are historically most familiar, the ego. The ego and the spirit. Decision-making for the eternal spirits who chose to inhabit human biology was never intended to be dominated by sensory input. In healthy function, the incarnate being receives the body's sensory input only after it is distilled by the spirit's primary informational system. In the right mind of the brain, sensory information is processed instantaneously, the pertinent essence being immediately projected upon the awareness screen of the resident spirit. The body-associated sense of self, also called ego, shares this same biocircuitry, but of the left brain. When the ego functions in a healthy, symbiotic relationship with the resident spirit, whose reflection it is, it has no need to think its way through the meaning of each and every sensory signal. During early experimental incarnations, when the first wave of spirits entered human forms, the importance of the ego was not yet fully understood. Experience quickly showed that without an aspect of identity, specializing in the material plane and the requirements of the body, one of two things was likely to happen. Either the ultra-conscious spirit, relatively insensitive to the frequencies of fear, would carelessly damage or destroy the body and die through some oversight, often as simple as forgetting it was in a body. Or, at the other extreme, the spirit would become so preoccupied with the unfamiliar nuances of the five senses in a material body that its consciousness would no longer be free for the creative and interpretive enjoyments that were its fundamental reasons for projecting into a body in the first place. The solution, naturally, was to designate a portion of awareness as a resident material plane expert, one who fully understood not merely the necessity of fear to protect the body, for the angels understood that much intellectually, but also the mechanics of how fear worked. This portion of awareness, which we call ego, would then prioritize and regulate the currents of fear that would inevitably be part of any excursion into the realms of matter. When necessary, calling the resident spirit back from the brink of behavior likely to prove biologically damaging. So it was that ego and spirit, two facets of a whole, divided responsibilities between them and shared the same human body. In healthy function, their symbiotic collaboration is as closely woven as the twin threads of the DNA spiral. In the expression of the first incarnate ones, spirit and ego were so entwined that in any moment the distinction between them could not be made. Like electrical alternating current, their awareness patterns oscillated in a configuration of perfect harmony. The ego knew that it was a facet of the spirit, and therefore it shared the spirit's joy, enthusiasm, and understanding. The only times when the ego might become distinct, and such times did occur occasionally, were when the attention of the incarnate one became so preoccupied that the soul neglected sensory input of major importance. When immersed in exciting creative projects, for example, spirits often orient their informational sensors selectively, filtering out some of their input in order to devote more of their attention to the project. In these cases, the ego poked the soul on the shoulder when required, Its interruptions were not always dramatic. Often it would merely remind the spirit that its body required food, water, or rest. While the spirit would dispassionately review sensory input with the clear-sighted objectivity of eternal awareness, the ego, on the other hand, proceeded differently. Its way of utilizing and experiencing the branching, tree-like human nervous system was unlike the spirit's. The ego feels the human nervous system subjectively, sensuously, slowly, and in detail, taking time to groom and care for the body and attend to its needs. Though different, the ego's and the spirit's respective uses of the human nervous system were both vital, both essential to a balanced, incarnate experience. When the fall occurred, the entire human determination of good and evil shifted over to the ego's much slower and more cumbersome manner of interpreting or digesting or eating the sensory input of the human nervous system. It was also prone to fantasizing and creating fear out of nothing at all. This slow, cumbersome, rational analysis of sensation played a necessary role in the ego's designated range of responsibility, but by its very nature it was subjective. Guided and directed by the spirit, the ego provided a valuable investigative tool for in-depth studies of the material world. However, without the overview of the spirit, the ego became truly myopic. By nature, the ego's view of itself and its surroundings was partial and incomplete. Its slower but highly specified left brain analysis of sensory information was a powerful and, even after the fall, fully operational vehicle for terrestrial research and development. Yet, without the spirit's input, it made no difference how well the left brain process operated. The mind was like a highly powered vehicle driven blindly. A lonely ego, defining itself in mortality and isolation, lacks the scope and expansiveness of the spirit. When it single-handedly attempts to operate the human mind, it is like a toddler wearing the oversized garments of an adult. It feels smothered beneath something made for another and larger being. It does not have the energy needed to use such an exquisite biological tool. Without the spirit, the ego is capable of using only about 10% of the brain's capacity at best, and even then, its observations and conclusions are usually inaccurate. A mind that conceives of itself as fundamentally separate from all that it perceives is an instrument of division and illusion. It can do nothing but divide, analyze, compartmentalize, and dissect. Everything on which it turns its attention is reduced and disconnected into segments, while the spirit, the life of the whole, is forgotten. With the fictitious premise that it is fundamentally distinct and separate from both God and nature lying at the root of its thinking, the ego is not actually capable of reason or logic, for its whole premise is a lie. This is why the historical egoic use of the human mind has been so destructive. It creates thoughts, images, personal identity structures, cultural institutions, and ultimately entire civilizations that are based on the illusion that the individual is fundamentally separate from the ground of being of which it and all of creation have emerged. Only the spirit has the necessary energy, intelligence, and operational awareness to use the full capacity of the human mind. When the awareness of spirit fills a human mind, it is an instrument of unity, an instrument of harmony, an instrument of cooperation, creation, and inner standing. It becomes a transformational vortex, a channel through which universal cosmic consciousness can flow into this physical world. As a component in the spiritual structure of the universal intelligence, cosmic consciousness, flowing through humankind into this world, egoic thought has a valued place. But when functioning in isolation, without the overview of the spirit, the ego's reasoning, prone as it is to fearful exaggeration, creates chaos, disorder, and disease. Perceiving separation where none actually exists, imagining itself, its species, the plants, animals, even the world itself as existing in fundamental distinction, egoic thought, separated from spirit, is devastating to people, to the environment, and to all the other life on the planet. The decision-making resulting from human reliance on exclusively egoic thought has given ample evidence of its inadequacy during these past few millennia. Yet, until now, there seems to have been no other way to do things. The voluntary cooperation of human egos could not be coerced. It has required this cycle of historical education to bring your race to its current level of consciousness and egoic receptivity, when at last we can communicate clearly with you as you see the ego-based reality crumbling all around you. Even now, your spirit-directed biocircuitry is processing information outside the range of your conscious awareness, outlining your behavioral options and determining which among them represent your most creative pattern of interaction, also called your highest timeline. If these intuitive processes were slowed and explained, if the many factors of which your ego is not aware were outlined and their multiple implications shown, your ego could find nothing beyond its comprehension. But that's not how it works. The basic building blocks of instinctual logic are the same as those used by the ego's slower reason, differing only in speed and accuracy. Yet, to access the deep intuitive wisdom of the life force, one cannot demand such explanation or interrupt the flow of moments by insisting upon a step-by-step breakdown of the spirit's subliminal analysis. One must simply trust and observe the results. Spontaneity is a rational, natural process in the constitution of love. Its accuracy is unsurpassed. It is not clouded by fear-rooted emotions, cultural bias, or addiction to linguistically structured thought. The non-resistant superconductivity of inner biological computing organizes data at the speed of light, and with a clarity that complements the purposes of you, the children of the light. Living with spontaneity instinctually. In the historical egoic condition, instinctual input is ignored. The culture that dominates human values with fear through ego mistrusts spontaneity so deeply, in fact, that children are taught from their earliest years to fear their own instincts. Young people intuitively sense that without help, their egos are incapable of effectively managing their affairs. And culture plays upon this sense of weakness. It distorts the truth behind this insight by teaching each new generation that since their egos are inadequate, they must develop a social persona, a protective veneer, an image of themselves behind which they can then retreat in safety, forever after pursuing physical plane relationships from behind a mask. Occasionally overtly, but more often through 1,000 forms of subliminal persuasion issuing from virtually every culturally adjusted person they encounter, the young are taught that the development of a self-image is an urgent matter of grave importance. The sense of self that culture's children subsequently adapt is superficial and fictitious. If their former self-awareness was inadequate as young children, they are certain that this new substitute is even more so. And so, they begin their outward orientation, looking always to others, parents, teachers, authority figures, for guidance, direction, and how to understand reality. Often, they stay in such outward orientation for the rest of their lives, assigning so little value to the inner voice of spirit that soon their instincts atrophy, all but forgotten. Like the others in their sleepwalking society, they begin calculating their life values using the ego's unwieldy and often anxiety-permeated process of reasoning. Their skill at this is the only measure of success they are taught to value. To live spontaneously, instinctually, to simply be, to say the right words without thinking them out ahead of time, to experience the purity of a mind uncluttered by troublesome and misplaced responsibility, to know exactly the right gesture, the right behavior, the correct creative response for each and every situation. Such are the birthrights of each and every human being. Every child comes into the world with his or her instinctual awareness healthy and intact. In the coming civilization of the stars, in the post-historic world, children will mature not only retaining this ability but developing it, honing it to a fine art to live in their spontaneous instinct. They and their societies will live spontaneously, instinctually, from moment to moment, as you are now being invited to live. Trust yourself, your instincts, your intuitive senses. Accept the birthright that has unfolded with you from out of the being behind all being. Humanity has emerged from the highest currents of a supreme intelligence. We are suggesting now that you unconditionally trust in the supreme intelligence that created humanity and the whole universe. You have been conditioned to fear what you might do if you were to act spontaneously, but such a fear is based upon a lie. You were not created in original sin or evil at your core. The universe has created in you not a demon or a fool, but a magnificent, luminous being. You share eternity's creative power and all the wondrous beauty of time. You share a single unified field of awareness with angels and with the Star Maker, the Prime Creator, Source, Mother, Father, God-sciousness. Should you fear the spontaneity that will reveal your own beauty? Should you fear the expression of your love? To funnel your expression of love through the narrowness of another's anticipated response is the beginning of death. You do so at the cost of your vitality. There is another way. Its essence is unconditional trust in life and love. Below the level of conscious awareness, feel the informational input of your surroundings flow freely in and out of your awareness. Feel your surroundings enter deep within you to be processed easily, autonomically, in accordance with life's design. When you relax and release your biology to flow in the uninhibited rhythmic currents of the love that animates all creation, your life force naturally organizes the data that flows into it through your center of observation. Masterfully, impeccably, it brings into your momentary awareness what is most important to your soul. Do not sacrifice upon the altar of your mind the sacred wisdom that rises with each beat of your heart. Do not let the grim priests of tradition tear out the very heart of the spontaneous currents that carry the insight of eternity. Let your mind relax in love and openness until it becomes an altar upon which the Creator's consciousness may rest. Spring bareback upon the naked energy of life and ride its current into your decisions. The inherent intelligence of life itself will bring you understanding of self and world and guide you unerringly into the future. It is far better to have a poor self-image than an image crafted in conceit. When the winds of change grow too strong for the fictional lives of humans, as they are now, those with a poor self-image will let it go and find themselves in God. But those who are already full of themselves have no room in their awareness for God, and they will resist any change that threatens the illusion they have worked so long to establish. When you relax and let go and receive God, you receive the consciousness that precedes all physical manifestation. The limitless consciousness of eternal love that was from the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, before, beyond, above, and within all relationship. This consciousness is the greatest gift that anyone could ever receive, but it already is your own cosmic Christ consciousness. As you allow your life to be guided by the currents of indigenous wisdom flowing instinctually from within you, you naturally receive and operate through cosmic consciousness. You find yourself immersed in the animating emanations of the universe. Upon the frequencies of eternal love, you rediscover your purpose to love. You remember your reason for this lifetime's incarnation, for taking on human form once again. You discover that you have access to an ocean of living information. Your access code to cosmic Christ consciousness is a child's unconditional trust. Chapter 8. This Season's Children. Yours is the story of a flower pushing its way gradually upward through the snows of materialism until finally it breaks through the surface crust of rigid tradition and emerges into the light of a new season. It has been hard for you of individual consciousness during this human winter, but you come from hardy stock, and the warming you now feel is no illusion. You see the sun arch higher in the heavens, higher than it ever has been before. You sense the changes in the air and know an age is turning. The snows of history's many perceptual crystallizations have all but melted away, while beneath them you have been moving ever closer to the light of this new day. What is this tradition of bending low? The snows are neither so heavy nor as lasting as when these cultural habits were fashioned. The age of ice is swiftly passing. You need not live as if you still carried the weight of history, so grave, so serious. Come, entertain the consciousness of the stars. Relax your heavy conceptions, the blocks and bricks that form history's icy walls. There are lands outside of these walls, beyond these cultural corridors that narrow your awareness of self and world. You see more clearly now than those who formed these solemn views in the coldest hours of the darkest nights. The world has been thawing for some time now. A new awareness crackles behind the eyes of children all over the world. Beijing and Adelaide, Kiev and Tokyo, Chicago, Sao Paulo, Cape Town. A new generation of little flowers rises through the melting snows of former centuries. They lift their heads now, like crocuses, tulips, daffodils, blooming to speak to their elders of a new way. You who are the parents of this new generation, listen to what this season's children have to say. They do not reject you or the principles that have guided your lives, but they know they must do what you have not yet done. Their destiny is to complete the achievement begun millennia ago. Be gentle with these little flowers of your love. Do not crush them beneath the heels of ceilings of windowless schools that bury them in facts they cannot understand without the natural light of spirit. Let them move beyond the established corridors of historical ways into the sunlight and open air of new meaning and new experience. Use your centers of learning, your school systems, to assist them in doing what no human generation has ever done before. Help them to blossom into all they can be, sure of themselves, confident in the wisdom, the life that lives within them. Give your children the tools of your culture as you would give paint and canvas to an artist. But do not tell them what to paint. Help them learn to express themselves in terms meaningful to them and to those in the world around them. Offer them skills to help express themselves more fully. The self of this generation expresses in uninhibited creativity as the greater self, which seeks birth into your world. As you help your children to better express themselves, do not make them feel that they are incomplete without your training or approval, that they are the partial beings who need your years of academic processing to be whole or satisfied with themselves. If you give them this impression, you make them cripples with a vested interest in those very illusory self-images that even now melt in the warmer winds of love's approaching season. Help your children. Do not handicap them and make it more difficult for them to adapt to these times of accelerating change. These next 2 decades will see the most rapid period of change any human civilization has ever known. To ride the currents of that great change, young and old alike will require all their natural wit and sensibilities. If you care about the young people who will reach adulthood in the early 21st century, the children who are in your schools right now, share with them all the wisdom you will, but preserve their inherent confidence in themselves, for this is how they show their confidence in God. A child's level of self-confidence is a major factor in determining his or her future success. The preservation of a child's natural self-esteem is far more important than the acquisition of any external technical skills or abilities. Many of these little ones have not forgotten the great being who shines through the filter of their individuality. Your role is to help them grow in such a way that they do not forget. Assist the incarnation of the eternal spirit within them, who is now dancing in their little body. When you see first their beauty and perfection, when you affirm their eternal reality of beingness, when you see it in their eyes, you cannot help but draw it forth. Bring out the best in them and in all whom you encounter. Give no energy to the fictions of those who do not know their immortality, but see instead the spirit who seeks to incarnate there in their body, within that individuality. Acknowledge the soul, relate to it, allow it to be drawn forth in your presence. Help another dimension of eternity slip quietly into your now. Help this new generation to awaken to their eternal sovereign divinity. And you, of younger years, you will not make the people around you happy doing what you think they want you to do. Only through being yourself can you give to the others in your world your greatest gifts. To do any less betrays both them and yourself. There are many people who, decades after adolescence, continue to live their lives based on how they think their parents want them to live. It is appropriate to respect your parents, to listen to their ideas, their suggestions, their advice. And there are many instances in which parental input is in harmony with the pursuit of your own purposes. Many instances in which it can help you cut through illusion and become more of yourself. But it is you who must evaluate this input. You alone must decide the direction of your life. For where do parents stop and where does society begin? Do not cut yourself off from ideas and suggestions that come from those whom you admire and respect. Listen to others with all of your senses, intuiting between their words, feeling the essence of spirit behind what they are expressing, considering their input. But ultimately, you must decide in your own heart and there alone. Base your decisions on your heart. To inhabit this new awareness, you are required to be yourself. For when you are a beautiful being, in touch with your eternal dimension, conscious of the generations that will follow you, conscious of generations that came before, immersed in the love that lights and unites the leaves of all generations upon life's singular tree. In the fields of thought that surround this planetary sphere, the noosphere, for those with ears to hear, radiates the essential wisdom of the wisest of those who have gone before. In these fields, there is a message circulating from the elders of your species, a message intended for the global village of today. If this message could be clothed in words, what the grandparents, the ancestors say, it would be something like this. Do what we have always dreamed of doing but did not quite achieve. You do not know, young ones, what we had to work against, and how much easier we have made it for you. We feel as though we have almost done it, but you must go one step beyond. Do what we have almost done. Create a world where our descendants will not have to struggle and fight as we have struggled and fought. Create a cooperative world, a peace-filled, loving world. Create it first in your heart, and then in your home. In our time, this was our challenge. In your time, it is yours. You see how well we met this task, this challenge. You see our faults, our failures. We have done better than some, perhaps, in our past, and not as well as others. But none of that matters now. You are this season's humanity. We speak to you now, children of the 21st century. Do not throw away your caution. Do not open yourselves to those who would exploit you or deprive you of your rights. But please, live with less fear than we did. The rights that you enjoy today are here to stay. Armed combat is not essential to the procurement of your daily bread. This much we have given you. There are still those who would take advantage of you, yes, but they are fewer and much less powerful than they were in our time. The communication tools you have today make it far more difficult for those who would abuse power. Perhaps the most important lesson our lives have taught us is this. You are always better off communicating with friends or with enemies. It makes no difference. Be open and honest and state your views as clearly as possible. Do not be afraid of giving away secrets. It is best to have no secrets. They are the source of much mistrust. Share with others who you are, your goals, your ambitions. We have found that on those occasions when we have communicated with our adversaries, miracles have occurred. Across national borders, across racial lines, across economic or religious or social barriers, breakthroughs of understanding have occurred by communication. We came to respect those with whom we spoke, and they came to respect us. These are the friendships that have served us well in our lives. Note this: agreement is less important than respect. For with respect, agreement may one day occur, but without it, agreement is impossible. Honesty and openness will earn you respect. The times we fought when we did not need to fight, we lost both the fight and potential friends. Count every human being as a potential friend. then do what you can to make that friendship real. Communication is a power much greater than confrontation. Do not lose sight of that. We have also seen, as all the elders of humanity have seen, that there is no scarcity of resources. Everything exists in abundance. The only scarcities have been of love and of imagination. As long as the sun shines, the earth turns, and the rivers flow, as long as the winds blow and the ocean waves lap upon these beaches, there is no shortage of energy, nor is there anything over which to fight, unless perhaps your basic needs are denied by another's greed. Then we would say, yes, defend your rights, but speak first, communicate first, use all your wit and ingenuity to avoid conflict. Then, if you must, defend what is yours. But know you may well lose as much as you might gain. Use force only in defense and only as a last resort. There is no cause but defense that justifies violence. No nation whose people are motivated for any reason other than defense could win a war in the present climate of the world. Perhaps this was not always true, but the wise ones among us have noted this, and whatever its cause, it is the reality of the times in which you live. Can you understand? This is the real news. Consider what it means. No nation desires to lose a war, and if only a defensive war could be won, who would ever launch a war? Can nations battle in mutual defense? If your youth pumps passion through your blood, and you desire an arena in which to test your spirit fire, turn to the athletic field, to the Olympic Games, to amateur and professional sports. Baseball, basketball, football, soccer, rugby, hurling, skiing, sailing, bicycling, dancing, cross-country racing. The options before you are endless and growing. Choose the field that best suits your nature. Compete to your heart's content. Enjoy the pursuit of excellence. Compete in marketplaces and music halls, in fields and amphitheaters. But if you seek to enjoy your lives, do not compete on the battlefield or in business. Leave behind the old world's greatest bane. Do not kill. Do not destroy. Do not maim or murder or ruin. In the end, you but do these things to yourselves, for there are no others. Let your competition be light-hearted and friendly. Celebrate the diversity of excellence. We have lived that you might know a brighter world. Do not throw away the promise we have given you. If you turn to violence in any of its forms, you betray those of us who have gone before you and those of us who will follow. There are no winners in violence, only losers and more losers. Do not let the pursuit of excellence in your chosen field blind you to the excellence of another. See the same spirit in them, pursuing the same excellence to which you aspire. Appreciate them in the same way you appreciate the skilled opponent who helps you hone and develop your skills to improve. Appreciate them as you would a partner, a coach, a trainer who helps you transcend what you thought were your limitations. These attitudes, simple though they are at the heart of the world we want you to create. Chapter 9. The Right Use of Language. The term spelling is used to describe the mechanics of language, and spelling, in the sense of casting or projecting forth a binding illusion, has been the chief activity of historical languages. Language is the mechanism of matter's spell, the means through which the spell is maintained from one generation to the next. Those who slumber beneath linguistic illusions limit themselves to the deficiencies, the blind spots, and the biases of a particular method of symbolism, which, even at its best, can convey no more consciousness than the consciousness of those who invented that language and the spelling of those terms. They imagine that without verbal conceptual understanding, there can be no understanding. Understanding can be symbolized and to some extent conveyed through words, but innerstanding itself requires language no more than a bird requires a cage. Innerstanding comes only through experience, and for experience there has never been and never will be a substitute. You cannot read about it or watch it and get it. Instead of serving as a tool of your creative expression to help you sculpt and mold sound and light into forms of beauty and grace, your Babylonian primitive tongues have defined you, limited you, and kept you in the narrow definition prisons of the cultures that gave them birth. Belief systems are illusions of linguistically structured thought. They have been the means through which these guttural languages have limited your perception. They are cages created by words, imprisoning the believers. Even insights that accurately reflect reality cannot be preserved effectively by any belief system. The very attempt to hold on to the truth destroys its living, changing nature. The same fruit cannot be both growing on the tree and preserved in a jar. It must be one or the other. The garden of living information that surrounds those who open their hearts in love is so prolific, its fruits so abundant, that there is no need for individual, organizational, or cultural preservation. The universe sustains visions and ideas that are in its best interests. Egos sustain ideas that are otherwise. What you struggle to retain is not the truth. The truth is always with you. It could not be otherwise. Some of that truth you feel and recognize. Some may still be hidden from your eyes to be revealed another day or another hour, when it is needed and not before. The truth that is portrayed in the words of human language is an externalized, symbolic representation of the truth that lives within you. It is an artifact, a key, designed to open the passageway that connects you with the living truth within you. The words that trigger comprehension are no longer important once comprehension is achieved. Below the level of linguistically centered thought, the life-giving current of truth flows continuously. The purpose of these accompanying words is to keep your mind occupied while these currents bring you a deeper inner standing. The phrases we use in these transmissions are designed as closely as possible around the living currents of truth that radiate from the consciousness that is now filling the thought fields of this world. These living currents of truth are pre-linguistic. They are the reality of this communication. These words you are listening to are but their symbolic representatives. As you listen to this book, meaning rises gradually beneath the level of your thought. As understanding surfaces from time to time and appears in your awareness, you achieve an insight. Each new insight becomes like a rung on a ladder, allowing the part of you it touches to awaken from the dormancy of ancient conditioning and climb a little higher. With each new insight, you climb yet another rung, leaving behind another layer of illusion. Upward, away from a matter-bound, egotistical view of the world, into the sunlight regions above the clouds, you rise into a world where you know yourself as a holy hologram of God-sciousness, who has come to these realms to be, and to be among the many sacred fractals of the One. You do not need to study these transmissions, analyzing and categorizing and translating and memorizing them as human minds have done with our teachings in the past. One who camps upon a few rungs of a ladder is as foolish as one who carries it along with him. You have only to allow these thoughts, as you encounter them, to trigger what changes they may in your own field of perception as you continue to move forward. Do not struggle for the kind of understanding that comes through effort. Intellectual effort has a place in the mechanical disciplines, but not in the reactivation of your spiritual truth. For that comes only when all efforts of the ego have ceased, and you accept yourself, ground zero, just as you are. When you relax and accept yourself, comprehension, inner standing rises unfailingly into your awareness. Like water surfacing in a spring, understanding appears. It seeks the surface of your thoughts. If you do not desensitize this surface with oily impurities of self-doubt, or seal it off with some crust of ideological ice, understanding will be there for you, a wellspring that will never run dry. Accept the inner standing that emerges in response to the moments of your life. Do not strive for more comprehension than that which appears effortlessly. You will know what you need to know and remember what you have forgotten. Let these transmissions wash over you like a gentle rain. Let our words splash across the surface of your awareness, flowing over all that you are, rinsing away the soil and the dirt and the stains of illusion. There is no need to hold on to these thoughts. Let them flow. And with them will go the soiled stains of lies. The current of insight that flows through this material into your awareness needs to continue its flow beyond you, outward and away to others. It is a passing stream of consciousness, a light current of thought. If you are drawn toward its translation into human media, keep its purpose always in mind, to rekindle in others awareness of God within, to bring others, by the most direct form of communication available, into awareness of the eternal being who lives in their hearts. The greatest healers who have ever walked this earth were not great because they helped heal large numbers of people, but because they healed the right person, the strategic other in their lives who most required their love. If your communication reaches through to but one other person, you have succeeded. The transition to post-historic human times will unfold without trauma, without fear or upheaval, and our goal will be accomplished in full. The translations of this eternal stream of consciousness into human languages are meant to last for only a short time. They are an intermediary spark to bridge the illusory gap between human hearts and the heart of God. Chapter 10. Opening the Etheric Antenna. To the seasoned traveler of the stars, a race who lives daily with access to a universe's library of information without ever making use of it, is more primitive than a race who has yet to discover fire. So simple a thing, the discovery of fire, yet so immense, so revolutionary the changes it brings. So simple a thing, the discovery of God. Awakening the sensitivity that allows you to access universal information requires a flip of thinking. It requires that you look from above rather than from below. It requires an accurate knowledge of self. Yet you cannot know yourself until your images of self are dissolved, and only love is capable of dissolving illusion. Feel love being offered to you from the life that rises in your veins. Feel love being offered to you in the sunlight that shines upon your home, in the rains that fall upon the fields that provide your grains, in the eyes of a child, a partner, or a friend. The love available to you in each moment is more than enough to dissolve the subtle ties that bind you in illusion. You are worthy. You are deserving of unconditional love. Relaxing again into the fields of pure perception that glow as God's awareness of spirit in a physical body. Releasing attachment to human ego knowledge, both personal and collective. Letting go of favored concepts, of images, of beliefs and habits. These are steps in a psychological process that each person must move through in the course of awakening. Relax. This process allows your spirit world sensitivity to blossom. It causes you to understand from a new perspective both your individuality and the whole of which you are a part. It does not destroy or diminish your ego. It merely washes away the illusions that have made your ego miserable. Relaxing into awareness of all that is releases your understanding of self from the bonds of gravity that hold it into struggle and fear. For if your ego is a reflection of spirit, having been created by God to maintain the safety of your body, then even at its core, your ego is God. It is distinct from spirit as the image in a mirror is distinct from the object being reflected, but without the one there would not be the other. When the reflective glass on your material biology and your understanding of it is clear and clean, both ego and spirit benefit from a world perceived anew. Your body is your soul embodied. Your ego is your soul as it expresses through a body. Your spirit draws its first sense of identity from the high-frequency energies of the constellation of love. Your ego draws its first sense of identity from the slower, materially attractive frequencies in the constellation of truth. Yet both constellations exist in the same sea of eternal being, and in a healthy state both spirit and ego perform their respective roles equally centered in God. The psychological process leading to awakening, though it can be described in many ways, is fundamentally a process of identity shift from a linguistically defined sense of self, rooted in your ego, and an exaggerated sense of your vulnerability, to a sense of identity rooted in the unified field of consciousness that is behind and within all individuality. During this process, your sense of self blossoms into an accurate awareness of who you are. This transformed awareness includes your former sense of being one among many, but it also includes an awareness of a reality far greater than the ever-changing worlds of form, of 3D awareness. You develop an awareness rooted in the singularity of eternal being, from which all individuality unfolds as an experiment. As you awaken into this awareness, you know yourself simultaneously as one among many and as one at the source of many. It is impossible to be truly individual without this dual awareness. Without this dual awareness, you are a latent possibility, a programmed product of human culture. You are not truly you. You are certainly not incarnate in any literal sense of the term. Remember, your choices are always honored. This is a free will universe. If you prefer an image to reality, the image is what you experience. You are even allowed to have the free will of pretending there's no such thing as free will. The psychological process of awakening is an initiation, a rite of passage. It demonstrates your willingness to turn away from a language-based understanding of reality and to restore your trust in reality itself, in the eternal being at the source of all life. This is a leap into the on-beyond, which requires courage. You must leap naked into eternity's promise, stripped of the assurances of time and 3D ego awareness, certain only that the vast benevolence that has given birth to this universe is more worthy of trust than the belief system of this historical, fear-based reality. The psychological process of self-actualization requires courage for another reason as well. To undergo it, you must be willing to accept the wonder, the power, and the awesome reality of human potential. No belief system requires such responsibility. On the contrary, belief systems offer to assume responsibility for you, protecting you from yourself, sheltering you beneath their many brands of dogmatic illusion, blocking your potential with blind spots and false ceilings. You do not have to face the truth if you hire a belief system to do it in your place. But belief systems demand a stiff price. They place a heavy tax on your energy. All belief systems siphon off the better part of your awareness. They confiscate your eternal sense of self and lock you into a flicker of fictitiously described time and activity. Throughout history, humankind has paid this price, seemingly willingly. However, the intensifying frequencies of love now make it easier for people everywhere to see what their saints and visionaries have always seen. Those who receive their impressions with the openness of a child feel an eternal consciousness seeping slowly between their thoughts. As their interest in the superficial chatter of the ego wanes, their attention turns to matters of relevance. They experience a cycle of blending, during which they learn to sustain their awareness in the eternal awareness that is growing steadily in the thought fields around the earth. Universal intelligence can then flow freely through them and into expression. Their centers of identity ride the crest of the eternal wave at the perfect point where one being spills over into the many beings. As an informational cell in this awakening planetary field of awareness, the extent of your consciousness determines your range of mobility. The extent of your consciousness is limited only by your ability to love and to embrace with your love the space around you and all it contains. Just as the cells of a human body are woven into the life and consciousness of the body as a whole, so too are love-centered human lives entwined within the life and body of God. as you use human circuitry in accordance with its design, as you use it to transform the powerful bioelectric currents of terrestrial energy into cycles of life-enhancing activity, you will come to understand more fully the awesome capacities of the human mind. When you, eternal spirit, use your mind to gather and step down the energies of universality, focusing and channeling them into specific dimensional creations, your mind's activity is so different, its capacities enhanced so far beyond its typical egoic usage, that one could say with some accuracy that it is not the same mind at all. In the emerging paradigm of the spirit, conceptual understanding is of secondary consequence. Those who function on the frequencies of love do not demand conceptual understanding at every step in their creative process. Their activity is therefore able to flow freely, rapidly, unhindered by the constant need to tabulate mentally each and every detail. They understand spiritually with their hearts and tangibly with their bodies. They also understand with their minds, should they choose to slow down enough to access that mental understanding. But, as lovers often do, they frequently choose to forego such a detailed analysis. Beings who function in a state of grace, in the state of flow, are secure in the knowledge that conceptual understanding is there whenever they choose to slow down and peer into it. But they have released their ego's addiction to the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. As lovers do, because of this releasing, it sometimes appears to those observing through the old historical ego filter that those functioning in the new paradigm are ignoring common sense. But this is never the case. The behavior of those who function in a flowing state of grace makes perfect sense, but it is sense that is drawn from a higher frequency of awareness. Its logic is not beyond the ego's grasp, but it is of a more rapid vibration than the slow frequency logic of the ego. For the ego to understand the lightening process through which the spirit reaches a sequence of decisions, it has to break down the process and study it one frame, one step at a time, and approve of each individual step. While this can be done, it is much better to experience instinctual awareness than to analyze it. The inner guidance of the life force, God-sciousness, embodies a deeper and more ancient sense, a sense common to conscious beings throughout the omniverse. It comes from a truly holy spirit, and is the shared property of all those who inhabit the conscious realms. It can be comprehended by those in the old ego historical paradigm But as long as they stay within the old paradigm, they will never know this life force source as emanating from within. The word that God sends into this turning age is meta-conceptual, multi-dimensional, telepathic, both more comprehensive and more specific than any linguistic terms. This is the living word of which you have scriptural mention, the luminous, living information that inspires all those who receive it and nurtures all those who welcome it into their lives. In a literal as well as a spiritual sense, this Word of God, the living Word of God, is the staple foodstuff, the nourishment of the coming age. It flows outward from your heart to nourish your mind and include you in your love. It is the understanding of life itself, providing you from within a quality of sacred individuality, divine sovereignty that will complement the world around you when you offer the same to all others. The living information is inseparable from your life force. Biologically, you have experienced the animation of your life force, but you are not truly incarnate until you allow this current into your conscious awareness. Biologically, this energy, the Word of God, the living Word of God, is biologically your life. As you allow it to become the center of your consciousness, your emotional realm is activated as an instrument of the living Word of God. Just as your eyes are designed to see and interpret certain frequencies of light, just as your ears are designed to sense and interpret other frequencies as sound, the human heart, the emotional realm, is designed to sense and creatively interpret the motivational, life-bringing energies that radiate throughout the universe. When you move beyond the vision prisons of historical ego, fear-based definitions, and release your heart to love, a superbly crafted etheric antenna unfolds from the luminous envelope that surrounds your body in light. This antenna behaves like a sensitive plant. When the heart is anxious, when emotions are troubled or turbulent, the antenna is turned off. But when the heart relaxes in love, the antenna's delicate, gossamer flowers unfold, like a beautiful plant coming into bloom, providing you with a sophisticated etheric organ designed to receive the information that circulates in the universal sea of being. There are 7 flower-like discs of this etheric antenna anchored in your spine. These flowering glands bridge spirit and matter. They are the biological receptors that translate the higher frequency information picked up by the chakras into language that your nervous system can recognize. Your chakras are designed to audit ultrafine frequencies, bringing both sensory and what some would call extrasensory impressions into your awareness. Your etheric antenna is the collective information gathered by all 7 internal chakras, and some others floating above and below. But your etheric antenna is damaged by violence. Your chakras are damaged by emotions of anger and hatred and fear. It is never in any danger from outside emotions, only from your own. Your etheric antenna of your combined chakras can remain open for months, even in the midst of violent external emotion, as long as you remain calm and continue to feel love for yourself and for those around you. However, when your love is withheld, your etheric antenna closes. There are no exceptions. Your heart must be returned again and open to God. Your heart must resume the expression of love. And even then, time is required before your etheric antenna's full natural sensitivity is restored. The fully activated human sensory system is synonymous with your spirit's presence and occupies the same space. It extends beyond those portions of it whose vibratory rate is slow enough to attract the molecular structure of your physical body. Your etheric antenna's spatial reach extends outward from the physical body to include a larger vibratory field, of which the etheric antenna is but one part. From the spinal trunk, the branches of the nervous system reach throughout your body, nurturing the many tiny leaves that are its cells. The uppermost branches of your spinal tree flower into the threefold petals of your human brain. When your love extends to include enough of your external world to admit the vision of eternity, you will feel its blossom-like sensors unfolding, blooming in your mind to bring you more complete awareness of the multidimensional eternality in which you live in the here and now. Yet the fully activated human sensory system is more than just an interdimensional communication device. In miniature, it replicates the structural pattern of its biogravitational field, the same pattern found in planetary, solar, galactic, and universal fields, a torus. When fully activated, as it is for all those in an awakened state, your etheric antenna of your chakras is capable of bringing through its own miniaturized circuitry the awareness of the archangelic beings who overlight each one of these spheres. Through it, incarnate ones are able to access and experience Baith and a system of information exchange common to all universally conscious entities, drawing upon a shared pool of wisdom, and you may know it as your own. For behind their subjective roles and specialties, all conscious entities share the common field of beingness, vibration. They experience the various individual foci in the sea of that being, not as others, but as features of their own universal wholeness. Just as the lattice work of galactic love, which holds this cluster of stars suspended, is mirrored above in the vibrational circuitry of this solar system, and then mirrored once again in the awakening circuitry of a whole planetary intelligence. On the micro scale, this same basic design pattern of eternal love is mirrored in human biology, thus providing us with universally compatible systems for the habitation, enjoyment, and continual creation of these phenomenal 3D realms. Chapter 11, The Sensuous Universe. When you remember the play that lifted your heart as a child, you will know the heart of God. You will understand the motives behind this universe, God's creations, and the interwoven fabric of space and time which holds them suspended in vibratory dance may be fraught with what appears to present-day human consciousness as dazzling complexity. But any playful kitten understands God's motives perfectly. Why do dolphins leap joyfully from the sea? Why do the morning birds sing? Why does the earth dance in trees and reach forests towards the sun? And why do children play? The purpose of this 3D earthly realm is enjoyment. This is a recreational universe, a recreational universe, designed to multiply the life forms that share God's great passion. Play. Its creation and appreciation, its bountiful development in structure, in symphonies of light, sound, time, and love. Beyond the shadowlands where God and self are seen as heavy and somber, the winds of change bring fresh currents of thought to those whose hearts are whole in love. Feel the creative melodies of eternity surrounding you, penetrating your envelope of light. As they echo in your soul, know that you are one with the maker of all music. Those who live intuitively are guided through the dimensional worlds by a rhythmic undercurrent of inspiration. Inner music guides their outer function, highlighting choices that indicate their most creative patterns of environmental interaction and communication. Through that music flows the joyful current of life. The music of creation releases energy, gives life itself to all who dance. Biology is not a somber dance. The universe is deployed in song. Listen to the melodies crackling through the air all around you. Some find their way into human media and drift to you from a radio, an open window, a passing car. Others appear only once in the ethers for your ears alone. Songs of love will be your maps in the new world, songs whose rhythms guide the energies of the stars. They enter human time tangibly and intangibly, both audibly and telepathically. These songs of love, their melodies overturn, undermine, and dissolve the structures of historical, ego-based, fear-controlled illusion. Sense the waves of the songs of love, the currents of their energy. Can you discern among them the musical stream of creation consciousness that called you into being? The song of individuation sung by eternity at your birth into time? The song that drew you from the fields of singularity into your human body? Drink deeply of the love songs that comes to you on the currents of this, your own definition song. Receive its nourishment, its direction. It pulses through your heart. As you relax into the expression of love, the center of your self-understanding shifts from your individuality to your universality, from past and future to present, from ego to spirit. As this shift from self-centeredness to God-centeredness occurs, the thoughts, visions, dreams, and motivational currents of universal being, cosmic consciousness, come to have greater emphasis than your own ego personality. The polarity of your emotional field shifts from fear to love. Your spirit regains access to your thought processes. Your ego is relieved of its excessive burden of culturally assumed responsibility and is happy and fulfilled, perhaps for the first time in your incarnate experience of life. As you learn to draw identity from the life force, your expression of it becomes the channel through which a steady stream of consciousness flows from Creator into creation. You become one of God's infinite dimensional terminals, individualizing perfectly for the time and place where you are. Whatever the next developmental step may be, your identity takes the form most able to draw it forth. Your behavior flows out of your instinctual nature. You pick up the tools of your trade and interact with your environment, drawing forth its potential through emotional, mental, and physical movements directed by the spirit, the music of your soul. This music is never tedious or repetitive, but always flowing through chord changes and melodic variations and tempo that keep it fresh and alive. The music itself carries the signal to curtail or modify activities long before you grow tired or desirous of a change. Though each one of our individual music varies, the source of the inner directional music is the same for all those whose lives are motivated by love. When you are working with others who have learned to live and love in this way, their activities unfold in a relation that is naturally harmonic to your own. While your melodies may differ, your rhythms are always aligned. You are able to coordinate your efforts without cumbersome surface-level organization. To the culturally conditioned ego, this appears as nothing less than magic. But the principles at work are natural law. Individual scores blend in the evocation of collective beauty, in the creation of harmonious social forms and new structures of matter, sound, light, and energy. They flow together in the composition of a symphonic society where workplace and recreational environment become one and the same. Those who live in this way do not look upon their occupations as chores or burdens. They make their living through their play. This is what it means to live in a state of grace. You currently have no large-scale models or precedents to help you anticipate this on a global scale. But as the people of your world return to living in harmony with natural design, they will know neither disease nor want nor poverty. Even now, before planetary human society as a whole relaxes into this symphonic pattern of being, you can learn to support yourself by doing what you most love to do. There is no better way than this to help in easing the transition for the human family. So long as you remain in identity patterns centered around physicality alone, you remain subliminally afraid of the earth itself. You have constant difficulty securing your material needs, and you fear becoming helpless. You do not know the ease and relaxation with which the produce of this planetary garden flows to those who love this world. The moment you awaken to the truth of yourself, the moment you realize that you are essentially a spiritual being, your relationship to matter changes. You have no further difficulty drawing to you all that you require. Those who serve the purposes of life are not troubled for its necessities. The finest food that this planet has to offer is only a small portion of the nourishment that comes to those who live their lives in the energy currents of eternal love. The earth recognizes people in whom God's love flowers. There is a sensuousness, a centeredness, a grace to their movement. There is a relaxed gentility of power flowing quietly within and beneath their actions. There is a humble assuredness about them, a reverence, a sense of humor, and a sense of the sacred entwined. They are the magical people with sparkling eyes for whom this earth has longed. Chapter 12, the World Economic Sculpture. When you see the chiseled canyon face on Mars, or our reminders in the Andes and the Yucatan, when you fly above the serpent mounds or gaze upon the pyramids, know that in reality, none of these symbols, not even the great Mayan calendar, nor the richly symbolic story of our breakthrough teachings on the hills of Galilee, are as significant as the sculpture of your present world order. Art has always imitated, and the finest art has always led to reality. If you could retreat to some higher ground to gain perspective on human affairs, you would see in your global economy a living sculpture of planetary significance. Like no art before, It is even now leading you and your race from beneath the illusions of a fading order to a new understanding of yourselves and the world. The present configuration of your world's economic interests has not occurred by chance. Their specific placement has meaning and design. It is a puzzle of sorts, a circuit board to short an illusion whose passing is near. Historical peoples assume their behavior is ordered and rational, yet often we have shepherded entire cultures in specific directions for centuries before even one of their number looked up to note what direction that might be. If people were more perceptive, they would recognize the guidance that has brought them and their nations into their present positions on Earth. They would know that despite belief systems and ideologies, despite differences in orientation and nationality, each vested interest that will ultimately survive the 21st century has something of value at its core. It is this essence that we nurture and strengthen until it blossoms like ripened corn and the husk of unreality is stripped away. In the dawning light of this new millennium, the framework surrounding human affairs can be seen as a chessboard of sorts, a 3D chessboard with each global interest represented by a piece on the board. Each piece, each player, as this new era dawns, is possessed with access to unlimited information, and each knows that using the information intelligently is the key to success. Institutionally invested human interests have at their disposal not merely computer technology to help them organize their information more accurately, but also a rising flood of information itself, unprecedented in the history of nations. A child today with a Christmas computer has more information at her disposal than the Vatican Library had at the height of the Renaissance. That same child, for the cost of a phone call, can tap data retention systems and in seconds retrieve information that would have been beyond the reach of the U.S. Defense Department as recently as the close of World War II. Yet new information technology merely reflects the field of intelligence that is growing upon the earth. It does not cause it. The leaves and branches of the vine reflect an inner genetic design, yet they are neither its architect nor its cause. There is no breakthrough in information processing that does not have its corresponding realization in human consciousness. And always, the realization appears first. What is tangible appears only after its potential has been observed in human awareness and described in some communicable form. It is possible, therefore, to anticipate coming changes in any human field by monitoring the insights that are finding their way into expression at the creative edge of human thought. because of the revolutionary leaps in understanding that have occurred in recent decades in the fields of international diplomacy, ecology, relationship training, sociology, and economics, to name just a few, the fact of humans' interdependence with one another and with the earth has now become widely acknowledged. As the implications of this new awareness of interdependence continues to manifest politically, the inevitable result is only a matter of time. The fear-based dynasties that have dominated historical peoples are facing an increasingly well-defined choice: fundamental re-evaluation and healthy change, or complete collapse. In nations that have recognized this, nations whose leaders have already drawn this conclusion from the direction and momentum of their histories, another conclusion also begins to suggest itself. Unthinkable at first, it is rejected, but it keeps bubbling up again and again. And each time it reappears, the cultural objections are fewer and less convincing than before. What a few great leaders like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. saw decades ago is now being realized by many world leaders. This whole process, this process of fear-based social orders moving inexorably toward extinction, is intentional. It's not random chance. History has been designed with this particular conclusion in mind. A new field of consciousness. The earth and her people are rapidly entering a new field of consciousness that is bringing it back into resonance with the primal rhythms of creation. This new consciousness is rooted not in the historical human understanding of God, but in an intelligence that resides within the very animating current of the universe. It is rooted in the informational reality of a universal presence whose awareness and memory is awakening inside human time. Awakening and gazing forth from within each vested interest. Each player in this planetary field, helping people to understand the greater context in which they move, the board, the other players, and the rules of the primate into universal species game. When the days begin to lengthen after the winter solstice, you know that summer will surely come. But the change is not immediate. It takes all of winter and spring for the earth to respond. Time is required for land masses to release the chill of winter, for water, soil, and rock to absorb and retain the heat of the sun. And so the inertia of history's chill requires a season to dissolve and warm up, though the cause of that dissolution is already present and active. cresting as a wave between the years 1987 and 1989, a new and greater love washed over this earth. Riding upon that wave, an influx of new consciousness entered the planetary field, bringing perspective and understanding to those who were attuned through their love. Many starseeds were born in those 3 years, who are now coming into positions of power. Yet it will be nearly another 2 decades before the full effects of this new influx of consciousness is felt, before its implications are fully embodied, before the new inner standing of spirituality is transformed from concept to reality. For countless millennia, successive waves of spirit beings, starseeds, lightworkers, and wayshowers have come to this planet to assist humankind's processes of historical education. But the influx of consciousness that rides upon this current wave is more powerful than any that came before in these 13 years that have passed since the end of the Mayan calendar. This is the beginning of the time of our angelic descent and the age of your awakening. The time when spirit and ego harmoniously integrate. The time spoken of in ancient cultures as the era of the gods' return. The peoples of the earth have glimpsed its coming and viewed it through the distorting filters of their indigenous terms and labels. Yet, the event itself is larger than any human system of understanding, broader than any cultural description. We, angelic beings, are aligning our fields of perception with all those who are able to understand themselves in real terms. All those who have learned to identify not with the body or the mind or the emotions, but with the spirit who animates them all. In the end, the question of whether it is they who awaken or we who incarnate loses all relevance. For the spell is broken. The shell of historical, fear-based, egotistical illusion is shattered, and a new creature emerges, blinking in the light of a truly new dawn. Trust unconditionally, dear soul, in the wisdom that designed the intricacies of the human body and the exquisite ordering of the galaxies, and these next years will unfold like their petals before you, like a flower opening to the sun rays of that new and brighter day. Trust unconditionally, dear soul, in God-sciousness once again, and your understanding will be as the fragrance of that flower. You have no need to fear, and you need to have no fear. Do not be concerned if you falter, if you make mistakes. Pay no heed to those who call to you from behind. Move wholeheartedly beyond historically manufactured thought into the thought currents of the universal intelligence that is awakening in this planetary sphere. Remain in your walk, your station, especially if it touches the government of a nation. Do not leave your work. Stay. Bring light and love into your job. Do your work with greater consciousness, and you will naturally rise within your profession, even as the sun of a dawning consciousness rises in the people around you. Do not wait for yourself or the world to change. Be here now, accepting what is. Harvest the fullness of now's promise. This is all you can do. Yet it is all that needs to be done. Help us, angels, to minimize the disruption of terrestrial systems of production and distribution, while working to transform them incrementally, as we have been transforming other and older structures in the past few hundred years. The old orders are turning away from fear. For their own interests, they are turning away from manipulation and exploitation. They are discovering satisfying new structures in service, education, healing. In the greater effectiveness of these new structures, the old structures are finding the prosperity and success that eluded them when their motives were not in the interests of all. You who are designed to work within the present systems of human power are the eyes that look forth from the towers of the knights and pawns, the castles and bishops on the chessboard. You are the lights of those worlds. Do not abandon your posts, or it may seem to the subjects of those powers that they too are abandoned. Too rapid a breakdown of production and distribution would deprive them of the time they need to perceive their state for what it is. Those who have been programmed to accept a feudal order may need your presence and a little time to awaken. You are the keepers of the old order's gates. Make entry difficult. Allow all to leave who wish to. Outside the earth is fertile, the season ripe. Others of you choose not to work within those structures. All about the chessboard of interacting global interests, you are building a new and benign environment. Landscapers, caretakers in the universal garden of magnificence, moving more freely than kings and queens, more mobile than knights of old. You note that the chessboard and its historical players intrude upon but one small corner of the garden. You are like flowers and herbs, like trees growing beneath and around the edges of the board, even as others are like grasses springing up within. The board itself grows annually more illumined, spiraling upward, outward, as the millennium dawns anew, beyond its two-dimensional symbolism, its 64 squares flowing into 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, the 64 nucleotides of the genetic code, spiraling, swirling, each luminous square animated multidimensional, alive. The context in which historical institutions exist has already experienced a fundamental change. Human, egotistical, fear-based assumptions are themselves shifting. Before 2030, humans will understand in wholly different terms both themselves and the world in which they live. The very ground of being will be perceived through the transformed vision of wholeness. Human consciousness itself will be illumined in the presence of the One who is awakening in this planetary field. This awakening at the end of history is of such power and of such awesome magnitude that its approach has been noticeably altering human affairs for nearly 2,000 years. As a causal force, its shock waves ripple backward through time, drawing all historical events toward it as a magnetic field draws filings to iron. This event, anticipated by Christians as the second coming of Christ, is in fact the first fully conscious incarnation of cosmic Christ consciousness, of the Eternal One, in the collective consciousness of a whole world's biosphere. Yeshua came to help prepare human understanding for this event, to herald it as the morning star heralds the dawn. But the dawn whose light is growing on the future horizon requires all of humankind, indeed all of biology, to shine fully, and such a dawn has no precedent. As this event approaches ever nearer, all human organizations rooted in fear will be faced with increasing structural difficulties until they either change, restructure, or collapse. Those who subscribe to illusions of supremacy, whether racial, religious, national, or otherwise, will share in the destabilization and disarray of their economies and their organizations, as all systems rooted in egotistical illusion continue to dissolve. With their belief in systems external to themselves, trusting in human concepts and institutions instead of the living God within them, all such individuals will be found wanting as their systems collapse. Yet there are few human organizations that do not have at their core a genuine vision of value, which, if not initially defined in service or in love, can now be redefined with greater clarity of those who seek to ease their society's passage into the new age. These organizations will experience not the destruction of systems that contain no one of the perceptions, but rather a more gentle restructuring that occurs when there is conscious human participation and a desire to preserve and build upon the best of what has been. Should you find yourself within a position of influence over existing systems of production or resource management or education or exchange, know that you have not come to such position by accident. On the deepest level of your eternal spirit, a level of identity you may or may not yet be aware of, you have chosen this position. Long ago you chose to be among those of us who would steward the resources of this world during these potentially turbulent times of transition. It is by choice that you are now in a position to facilitate the equitable distribution of essential goods and services, thereby helping to lessen adjustment difficulties during these years of fundamental reorientation. During the 2020s and 2030s, many of your current systems for producing and distributing the necessities of life will remain crucially important and in dire need of change. As we grow into the millennium after awakening, some of these organizations will continue to be of heightened value. Yet the harmony that will come to the nations of the earth by the end of this cycle will be at once deeper and more sublime, radiating from within all things, a spiritual harmony pervading spheres, both manifest and unmanifest, a symphonic current of cooperative exchange, benefiting all humans. The approach of spirit causes an intensification, a quickening of vibration on the perceptual frequencies that provide personal as well as collective human awareness. As the vibrational rates of these frequencies intensify, it becomes more difficult to maintain a life or an institution organized arbitrarily along the currents of fear, for such patterns are foreign to the awakened human nature that is emerging. Centers of greed and corruption, long ignored or taken for granted, are exposed. To some, matters may even appear to be worse for a while, but all wounds must be cleaned before they can heal. Before the graceful symmetry of an enlightened economic order can replace the dusty stagnation of a closed society, there must be movement. When the windows are opened in the spring and the breeze enters the house, replacing the stale air of winter with the fresh air of a new season, it naturally stirs up the dust. But it would be a foolish housekeeper who would leave the windows closed all summer for fear of a little dust. The winds of change must flow freely around all social structures to sculpt them anew. New challenges will naturally arise along with the new freedom and openness. For a time it may even seem to some as if security and stability have gone to the wind. Yet this cannot be prevented. The consciousness that is arriving here to awaken in human affairs is that of a moving, living, creative being. Yours is not a stationary God. So it is that the winds of change blow more strongly through human affairs during the 2020s and 30s. You have anticipated this as the time when the changes experienced on personal levels during the 1960s and 70s would appear in government, international banking, and multinational corporate affairs. These changes have begun and are irreversible. They will continue throughout the 2020s and 30s, gradually helping the human world embrace the consciousness of love, openness, honesty, equality of rights and opportunity for all. During this coming phase, in most parts of the world, more progress will be made than many now believe possible in areas such as human rights, ecological awareness, nuclear disarmament, education, elections, and the fulfillment of basic human needs for food and water. But there will be a few locations that hold out, pockets of resistance. And in these places, conditions will worsen up to the moment of collective awakening. It is not negativism to state this. Shadows become more clearly defined as the light grows. The brush of education may help to soften the edge of a shadow in some of these instances. International sanctions will help in others. However, most people will find their greatest leverage for positively affecting their world in those nations where the political structure encourages the currents of new awareness. There are a few. They know who they are, who are called on to directly address the areas of heightened conflict. Be careful. Too much distraction with pockets of negativity can dissipate your personal power, blind you to the larger global perspective, and greatly reduce the service that you might otherwise offer. When there lie before you dozens of opportunities to apply your energies, skills, talents, and insights, opportunities that assure you of having a positive impact on people's lives, as well as the earth and her creatures, it is not generally wise to invest your time in situations where you do not have the invitation of cooperation of those whom you seek to benefit. Observe which people are allowing new leadership and new awareness to guide them. Notice how certain communities, cities, even whole societies are stepping beyond the fearful paradigms of the past. This is very significant. The new consciousness is arising, phoenix-like, in the midst of the old. Your world is being healed. It is becoming whole. No one system of government in the historical ego fear-based condition has ever been perfect or even functional. But many systems, often ideologically quite different, contain within them the seeds of perfection. Those who look with a deeper vision see familiar figures moving beneath the platforms and behind the stage props. Listening for the truth amidst the surface clamor, they hear the angelic inspirations behind socialism, and know they are the same voices that inspire democracy, the same voices that have always encouraged people to break the yokes of tyranny, politically and in the more subtle government of the soul. Your world has moved through much during this most recent cycle of education, but do not forget, even during historical times, the greatest movements have been not political, but spiritual. Chapter 13. A New Order of the Ages. Starts with a croak. Chapter 13. A New Order of the Ages. Starts with a quote from the Starseed Transmissions, the first book. We are not in much direct contact yet with government officials, nor with world bankers and international financiers. Our first contacts with them will occur during the more powerful transmission of 1987 to 1989. This quote from December 31st, 1978. The replication of another generation in the image of the former is no longer possible. The current generation of the young will not drink of the fountain of illusion, for the perceptive of your race have felt the changing climate of the world, and they have realized that in this new climate, generational duplication would not perpetuate their societies, but terminate them. It is in the interest of every government, democratic or otherwise, to cooperate with the changes of these times and to allow their young people to pursue options and develop capacities beyond those available in societies in which ideas and identities are mass-produced. The stability of a government is not threatened, but increased by those of its citizens who become conscious. Ruling interests will not necessarily be dissolved during these decades of transition. However, if they wish to remain solvent through these times and on into the post-historic era, they must recognize and adjust to the intensifying frequencies of love. For institutional solvency now hinges upon the ability to restructure along the vibrational lines of the intensifying energy field of awakening consciousness in patterns compatible with the many diverse forms that love can take. Not only will this assure their survival, but, more important, it will assist the overall human transition from the fear-dominated historical order to the new order of love-centered creation. Their skill at this and the degree of consciousness with which they participate will determine their level of prosperity. Though present-day systems of government must evolve further before they fully represent and embody the spirits of their respective peoples, they are nevertheless a vast improvement upon the tyranny, and in many cases the absolute tyranny, that preceded them. How easily some forget. How near to you even now are men and women who remember living under the emperors, the tsars, the fear dynasties, before the Second World War. You can be sure that those who remember the times before the old orders were shaken do not wish for their return. The actual and legal protection of basic human rights is still being established in many nations of the world. But a century ago, in those same nations, such rights were not even conceived of, certainly not among those who governed. What the founders of your present systems have wrought has been imperfect, to be sure, but the movements they have initiated are far from complete, and their direction is healthy. Wherever our influence extends, the process of democratization continues. The recognition of human equality grows, along with a passion for liberty and a sense of personal involvement in the collective human destiny. Those whom we touch no longer feel that they are passive observers of human events. They realize the transformative power of truth when it is honored, lived, and articulated sincerely. They become involved, lovingly. The next 2 decades will see the many sprouts of democracy that have struggled through the spring thaws of these past 2 centuries come into flower. These will not be decades without challenge, immune to economic uncertainty or political upheaval, but so it must be. For these are decades of promise and transformation, decades slowly filling, even now it has begun, with the cosmic consciousness of the Creator. In this growing field of awareness, harmony is empowered and given authority to stabilize cultural, political, and social revolutions that a short time ago could not have occurred without violence. Along with deeper terrestrial processes and the currents that rule human affairs, world events are gradually being drawn into resonance with the steadily growing field of planetary awareness, even before the critical moment when that field itself gels in the cohesive realization of its singularity. The histories of your present nation-states, though they are fraught with intrigue and scandal, and distorted by the fears of troubled human egos, are histories nevertheless, for those who choose to examine them through the eyes of the Spirit, of vastly improving conditions for the peoples of your world. On every continent, workers of this decade are far better off than those 50 years ago, to say nothing of a century ago. Spiritually, economically, politically, they enjoy conditions today that yesterday existed only in the mind of a few visionaries. Your present world is built on assumptions inconceivable to your ancestors. Yet it is good that you do not rest on yesterday's progress, so you seek to move on to better conditions for yourselves and your children. We support you in this deepening. We encourage you and provide you with the insights required to further build your dreams. For, in truth, the assumptions upon which the present human world rests need to continue on the currents of change. But do not deny the gains earned by those who came before you. Your governments, for all their failings, are reflections of the hopes and fears of the people they govern. As your hopes become shared visions and evolve into realizable strategies, your fears will continue to diminish. Your governments will continue their metamorphoses into ever deeper actualizations of democracy and the principles of equality in which they are rooted. The health of a nation's governing structure is directly related to how much it is guided by the great lessons of history. For every violent change, there is an equal and opposite pain, a price paid by victors and vanquished alike. Military power. Until the moment of final planetary awakening, when the field of human consciousness gels into cohesive realization, military power will continue to be a necessity for all but a few nations. The purpose of military power is to minimize violence, to ensure that the strong do not prey upon the weak, to use its force, if necessary, to ensure that small ruling elites do not exploit communities, to halt explosions of ethnic violence while simultaneously using statecraft and diplomacy to address and rectify the imbalances that always underlie such explosions. These are valid and, for a short time yet, still essential uses of military power. A military occupation that enforces an imbalanced and inequitable status quo is counterproductive, whereas an occupation that disarms opposing factions while facilitating between them negotiations that address the underlying currents of contention is truly a peacekeeping and, if it does its job well, a temporary force. Whenever military presence extends over long, there has been a failure to bring contending parties into meaningful negotiation or to allow them sufficient freedom of expression. Governments weak in negotiating intelligence, who attempt to compensate militarily for their weakness, have been declining since the 1960s. Pacific, peaceful nations, meanwhile, have been prospering and will continue to prosper as this transition progresses. In an age of information, when new consciousness illumines the ancient corridors of power, and even the darkest places embrace openness and change, the leaders of most nations are realizing that, except in self-defense, violence always proves counterproductive. It is becoming obvious that communication, not confrontation, is the wave of the future and, indeed, the new human frontier. Warfare is a form of communication, a primitive signaling strategy used to resolve disagreements, usually between people who speak different languages or think in incompatible ideological modes. Warfare is very expensive and notoriously inefficient. When far less expensive computer-based communication technology can cut through language barriers, instantly identifying the imbalances underlying any dispute and offering multiple scenarios of resolution, there is no longer a need for war, especially given the unacceptable costs of a nuclear conflict. Advanced communication technology can predict with frightening accuracy exactly what a given war would achieve, the probable outcome, the cost to society, and approximately how many decades and billions of dollars of recovery it would require. It can itemize the resources, human and other, that would be irrecoverably lost in a projected conflict. When such projections can be made cheaply and accurately, economics alone are enough to retire war as a tool of communication. This may be news to many, but among many high-level military personnel, this information has been circulating for quite some time. As a result, the intelligence level of the world leaders has been noticeably upgraded in recent years, as has the entire level of the international exchange. While popular culture continues to see armed conflict as a viable way of settling differences, warfare is rapidly becoming obsolete, an artifact of pre-informational times. It is very clear that we will never see nuclear war on this planet again. The decline of tyranny and repression. In most cases, those who govern the democratic republics of the world sincerely desire to create a better human community. We do what we can to strengthen and assist the clarification of such motives. Wherever power elites dissolve before the pressures of these changing times, wherever aristocracies or dictatorships are in the process of becoming open market democracies, wherever entrenched financial interests are losing their ability to control and manipulate disproportionate shares of terrestrial resources, you see people who are being influenced to one degree or another by our energies of awakening. Their activities, though still perhaps tainted with some subconsciousness, are at their cores motivated by the growing awareness of the One, whom most of all of them cannot yet call God. At the beginning of Western civilization, the materializing forces had structured the patterns of fear to restrain, to hold back, to harness as much as possible the approaching field of eternal consciousness. The early breakthroughs of clear thought in the warrior nations of the West were harnessed by the Roman Empire, and later by the monolithic feudalism of the Christian monarchs. Our teachings could not remove that restraint, but they could and did modify it. They weakened its hold. Even the feudal lords of the earth attempted to use truth to further their own ends. Truth used them and spread despite their attempts to regulate and control it. The first breakthroughs of objective thought were imperfectly translated, practiced, and understood, but enough of their influence seeped through to cause these past 2 millennia to become times of declining influence for fear-ruling elites. Tyrants still appeared, but the duration of their tyrannies came to be measured in months instead of decades, in years instead of hereditary dynasties. And wherever there were those who attempted to manipulate and control the energies of human exchange, their way grew more difficult. Self-righteousness defeats the purpose it presumes to serve. Those who fight what they despise with deception only strengthen its hold, sowing the seeds of further deception, which then have no course but to grow and appear in yet another decade or generation, presenting yet another opportunity to be seen clearly and resolved. Resolution on the first occasion requires more deliberation in the short term, for it forces the deeper issues up into awareness of those who may prefer not to see them. Yet it is the only path to long-term resolution. Approaches that merely mask the symptoms of inequality are far more destructive than the perpetrators of those approaches generally realize, for beneath their veneers, inequality continues to exist, and there, hidden in the darkness, it grows until it surfaces to explode again in yet another and stronger upheaval. Did Sherman's march to the sea bring the ravages and hardships of the U.S. Civil War to a more rapid conclusion? Or did it create such deep-seated prejudice and animosity that another century was required for the nation's healing? The end justifies the means only in the logic of a fear-based ego using deceit. Wherever evil is chosen in any form, it sows everywhere about it the seeds of its opposing evil. In the end, it does not deliver, it consumes. The choice of love may not always seem the swiftest path to the resolution of difference, but it is the only certain one. The October Revolution, the storming of the Bastille. Examples abound of instances in which the powerful creative energies that we angels were introducing into the patterns of existing national structures became exaggerated by those who were the stewards of those energies. The stewards were thrown off balance by a success for which they were not prepared. Often they accompanied the initial purpose of the transformative energies, removing the czars from power in Russia, removing the kings from France, and then unwittingly provoked the chaos that follows self-righteousness with the precision of a shadow. In the end, they inhibited the arrival of the very social equality that they sought and truly desired to create. Those of you who wield the powers of transformation during these times must learn from the excesses of those who have wielded lesser powers before you. Use your powers with humility and with compassion, or you will lose them to those who regard love for enemies in terms more immediate than your own. In cases where the influences of education do not prevail, you will be given the power to remove those who maintain patterns of dominance and exploitation. Do not be afraid of this power. Be decisive in your use of it, but use it always in love, and do not stop halfway. Remove both dictators and the imbalances that allow them to exist. And when you have succeeded, extend to them the same forgiveness that you yourself have already received. Wherever possible, enlist them as helpers, advisors, and co-creative agents in the continued restructuring of the nation. Respect will win them over more surely than corrective measures. Give them the opportunity. Their insight into areas where your own experience is limited may prove vital to you in effecting a smooth transition. Today's intent counts far more than yesterday's failings. In the eyes of God, it is all that counts, for in reality, it is all there is, your intention. Avoid backlash from those whom you have removed from power, or from those who once supported them. Welcome all into the light of the dawning order, knowing that an ocean of public support provides far more effective social regulation than any amount of legislation or punishment. If the structures of a nation's government are not built upon a broad social base, they cannot endure. Sense the skills and talents, the strengths and weaknesses of each one. Then let each participate according to his or her ability. This will greatly expand the talent pool available to support your efforts, and stabilization will occur more rapidly because of it. Where you see repentance, sincerity, and the demonstration of genuine goodwill, value it. Use it as wisely as any other resource. Just as the progression of the last 2,000 years has made it increasingly difficult for aristocracies, the rich and powerful ruling families, to exploit masses of people, so too, on a subtler level, it is making it ever more difficult for governments to be too far out of tune with the voice and spirit of the people they are politically representing. Government derives its only authority and the legitimacy of its power from the will and spirit of its people. When a government loses rapport with the people it governs, it must change or be changed. It is too unstable to remain. Repression might delay a nation's movement for a short while, and in an age of electronic media, that time is far shorter than it once was, but it cannot prevent it. Repression will only multiply the difficulties associated with realignment when the populist movement inevitably breaks free to release its pent-up desire for change. Yet, repression is not always the response of tyrants. Often it is an unconsidered knee-jerk reaction, not thought through or planned, a reaction that the government involved quickly sees as an error, but which it feels it must nevertheless defend and uphold to preserve credibility and respect. This sort of logic was dubious even when the pharaohs ruled in Egypt. In today's electronically altered media culture, it is antiquated and self-defeating. Honesty and openness offer the only certain route to credibility. People get tired of those who always insist that they are right. Well, in the present climate of change, they generally support those who admit mistakes, make intelligent adjustments, and move on. When repressive regimes have begun to feel the growing and potentially explosive power of the people they presume to represent, and their leaders seek to avoid the pending explosion, the pressure cooker analogy cautions that it is as unwise to suddenly remove the lid as it was to put it there in the first place. Repressive measures should be removed gradually over a period of weeks or months, with honesty and candor from government leaders, explaining to those affected what they are doing and why. They should begin with immediate changes that demonstrate their sincerity and then commit themselves to specific timetables of future changes, securing the agreement of all concerned. Even the worst government provides services that, if suddenly abandoned, would create hardship. It is important that there be a time of transition. difficulties are minimized in slower shifts of power. Even then, it may be too late to entirely avoid violence from the extremes, but a once repressive government can rest assured that the violence associated with its voluntary dissolution will be much less than the violence that would have occurred had its leaders attempted to retain power. Times of shifting leadership are often volatile. Those associated with the old government share responsibility with those who represent the new to create a smooth transition. To minimize potential violence, it is wise to focus public attention on incoming rather than outgoing leadership. It is always prudent to invest more attention in the future than in the past. Justice can proceed with wisdom. Revenge cannot. Revenge has the ability to divert otherwise creative public sentiment into passions that can easily run out of control. Where power has been relinquished voluntarily, forgiveness, rehabilitation, and education will serve national purposes. If legal proceedings are in order in relation to former leaders, they should certainly not occupy more of the national awareness than the opportunities and possibilities presented by the new order. After the French Revolution, such misplaced emphasis sidetracked and nearly discredited a noble vision. National psychology. The psychology of a nation can be healthy or unhealthy, much as that of an individual. The study of national psychology has emerged in recent years as the newest and, for now, the most important branch of the social sciences. Many of the same criteria that have been used to evaluate the health of individuals are now being applied to nations. The resulting insights, often revelations in every sense of the term, are leading to new, enlightened, and far more productive national and international policies. Few outside the intelligence agencies of the industrialized nations are accustomed to thinking of countries as collective entities that can just get sick like any other life form can. But this sort of thinking has already terminated the Cold War. Its increasing application in the years ahead will revolutionize the field of international diplomacy, like Einstein's theory of relativity revolutionized the field of physics. During the 1920s, for example, both Germany and Japan had specific national disorders. If these disorders had been properly diagnosed and realistically addressed by the rest of the international community, and if certain reasonable adjustments had been granted by those who controlled what was then the British Empire, World War II would have never taken place. Of course, the past cannot be changed, but the present and future are being affected profoundly by this growing awareness of national psychology. A nation's psychological health is vital to the happiness and prosperity of its people. Leaders and opinion shapers, both in and out of government, have a responsibility to promote policies and perspectives that lead to good national psychological health. It is no coincidence that such perspectives reflect the truth. The truth promotes health, just as surely as deceit produces disease. The truth is never contained in opposing ideologies, Truth is in the reality that overlights all healthy opposition. In the affairs of a nation, there is a need for diversity of views and opinions. Healthy views and opinions may diverge 180 degrees on any one issue, yet still encourage creative exchange and promote equitable national policy. The spokes of a wheel diverge 180 degrees, yet they are precisely what give the wheel its strength. In order for an eagle to fly, its wings must reach out equally in opposite directions. An eagle with a broken wing, like a totalitarian regime, is unhealthy. The new science of national psychology recognizes that in the affairs of a contiguous human community, there are unhealthy views and opinions. Their primary feature, as well as their common denominator, is intolerance. Unhealthy views and opinions do not grant the validity or even the possible validity of any other view. They emphasize division. They lead to lopsided, destructive, and often ethnocentric policies that favor elites and diminish freedoms. There can be a broad spectrum of healthy, diverse viewpoints, all contributing to the balanced progress of a nation. And there can be an equally broad spectrum of diseased viewpoints, leading only to hatred, violence, and division. Health, or its absence, does not lie in perspectives themselves, but in the hearts of those who hold those perspectives. Where alternate views are respectfully exchanged and considered, nations prosper. Where those very same views are exchanged in anger or in fear, a nation suffers. When a government ceases to tolerate diversity of views, curtails freedom of expression, and censors its media, the people of that nation have a responsibility to either change their government or establish another. This is more than a right, it is a sacred trust. The articulation of vision is the first order of business for any new government. If that vision is to succeed in establishing and maintaining rapport with its people, it must include in its very preamble, in nations where such things are not already established, specific and legally irreversible mechanisms to guarantee the freedom of media, the freedom of elections, the preservation of basic human rights, the assurance of universal legal equality to its citizens regardless of race, sex, religion, nationality, social, economic, or lifestyle distinction, and last but equally vital, assurance that all of the people under that government's jurisdiction have equal access to the basic requirements of life. While the communist and the developing nations of the world have more often suffered from governments not sufficiently responsive to their populations, in the United States and in a few other nations, the other extreme has occasionally been experienced. This occurs when a government attempts to please the whims and passing fancies of its people, rather than their genuine needs. It is the result of insecure and often inexperienced politicians who lack the courage to act always in accordance with their highest vision. Instead, they allow their decision-making to be determined by what they imagine the people want or what they're being paid to do and say by corporations. A politician is not A leader. Those who are more concerned with elections and a popular vote than with what they believe to be in the best interests of the people they represent lack the vision and integrity that would qualify them as true leaders. A leader always acts according to his or her vision, considering carefully the views and feelings of his or her constituency, sensing the overlighting wholeness of those views, how they converge like the spokes of a wheel in the central hub of balance that is the truth. And then the leader acts upon what he or she genuinely believes to be in the best long-term interests of the society, the environment, and all who may be affected. A leader may appear in the field of politics, as well as in any other field, but a true leader is not controlled by elections or opinion polls. A true leader is attuned to the deeper, long-term rhythms that pulse through the collective heart and is inspired and guided by them. He or she is not overly impressed with superficial fluctuations or with those who all too readily fall under their spell. A good leader knows that as the systems of production and exchange of the Earth's nations become increasingly entwined in a single global economy, vision that remains local or even national in scope may yet be myopic in terms of planetary realities. The political-economic climate of this world has only recently entered into the maelstrom of history's final decades. The pace of change will continue to accelerate until the final decade of the 21st century. A good leader will facilitate, rather than ignore, what is essentially the most fundamental revolution since humankind was distinguished from its mammalian cousins. In a healthy society, economy always follows ecology, and education precedes them both.